Well, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Yes.
thrilled to be able to work on this project. We really appreciate council's support, our commission's support, our leaders' support, and all the other departments. This has been a huge effort, not just by Recreation and Parks, though we've been leading these efforts, but it's really been a citywide effort to create these code changes. So I'll see if this clicker works, and we'll just run through what we're really proposing here today. Great. Okay, so just to reiterate, as Chair Brown already mentioned, when we talk about public trees, we're talking about all the trees that are growing on city-owned properties. Those trees are managed by the Recreation and Parks Forestry team. Our city forester is here with us, Steve Horhet, and he will be assisting in some questions that may arise. And then the public tree code that we're talking about improving is really to protect those trees that are growing on that publicly owned land. So street trees, park trees, or any trees like the trees growing outside here on the City Hall campus. Before we get too far into the discussion, I've realized it's important to talk about how we measure trees in the first place. So in the tree industry, we talk about diameter inches. Okay. So trees are measured by the diameter of their trunk at 4.5 feet above the ground. Obviously, trees come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, so that visual on the right just shows some different situations. But really, we're talking about diameter. It's either called diameter at standard height or diameter at breast height is what it was historically called. So when we talk about tree sizes and tree diameter and tree inches, we're talking about the trunk of the tree. As Commissioner Tamir and Councilmember Remy have already pointed out, we have an urban forestry master plan, and those goals that we created in partnership with the community. And these canopy goals are all about growing, prioritizing, and preserving the trees that grow here in Columbus. So our overall goal of reaching 40% by 2050, but those two intermediate goals of stopping net canopy loss and investing in equitable canopy are both critical as well to reaching that pathway of that overall goal. So when we embarked upon this project, there were several reasons that we wanted to, beyond just it being an action in the Urban Forestry Master Plan, that we wanted to take on this work. So I already mentioned the no net loss goal. We see this protecting public trees as really important for stopping net canopy loss. But some other reasons were that Chapter 912 that covers trees and shrubs was last updated in 1991, so we wanted to take a good look at that code and modernize it. 30% of our trees are growing on public property, so while it's not the majority of the canopy, it is important to, It is important to protect that portion of our canopy. We're a large landholder as a city, and we want to make sure we're doing our part, leading by example, and preserving as much canopy on our land as possible. And we're really looking toward the future and eventually looking to what we can do to protect trees on private property as well. I'll talk a little bit about the 2015 executive order, but something that we learned when reviewing policy for the Urban Forestry Master Plan was that there are loopholes that exist in this current executive order that we're looking to address with this code. And ultimately, those loopholes in the current system means that we lose more tree inches than are being replanted under our current system. A little bit about the process we followed. We took the majority of last year to draft our first tree technical manual. We've never had a manual that is all about trees here in the city, as well as potential code language. Throughout the last 10 months, we've had 35 meetings with other city departments, including a 7-part focus group series. And this is based on comments that were made and really just trying to figure out the logistics and implementing how we will implement these changes in a way that works for everyone. We are having 2 public comment periods. So we had one initially before we started drafting anything last February, and then we're in the middle of a second comment period now that we have draft documents for the public to review themselves and provide more detailed input. Our goal is to get to legislation, as Commissioner Tamir mentioned, getting to the commission meeting in October, and then council action October, November, and then 30 days after the second reading, having that be finalized in December. And we're proposing a 6-month grace period with enforcement of the manual taking place July 1st of next year.
It's fun. It just, you have to roll with it.
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm sorry. Oh, it's not me? Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I just would like to walk us through some of the different, major changes that we're proposing. The tree technical manual I've mentioned, we're really accomplishing 2 actions in one. So there's the best practices manual was a recommended action within the urban forestry master plan. And at the same time, it's supporting this public tree code. So the idea being that, as you all know, city code should not have all of the details that might need to be updated frequently. It really should be broad and flexible and allow for changes over time. So that's what we find is the strength in this manual, is that's where our details are, and that's where all those processes are going to be held. And that will allow us to revise the manual over time. I want us to talk a lot about mitigation just because it's a really important term. So before I get, okay, awful. Should I switch? It's okay.
It won't be any better.
It won't be any better. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Mark, just so you know, Rosalie, we're going to plant Mark when this is all over.
You actually, you might, because you're I guess you're missing the.
Oh, okay.
My mic's still on.
Is this going to work? Okay. We'll try this. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so mitigation. So if a public tree is removed, when we say mitigation, we mean what steps are we taking to make up for the loss of that tree? So I mentioned the 2015 executive order. That really set a foundation for our city to, for the first time, require mitigation when public trees had to be removed during city capital projects. I mentioned loopholes. It exempted routine maintenance, and it also, in the text of the order, exempted privately funded projects. So what we're proposing under the new tree code will require mitigation for all removals of public trees, no matter the project owner, no matter what type of project. And mitigation, how that loss is made up for could be replanting, fee in lieu, or a combination of both. Okay, so going through those options, when it comes to replanting, in our current system, trees are replaced based on a ratio. So it could be 1 tree for 1 tree, if it's a tree under 12 inches in diameter, all the way up to 5 trees when 1 tree is removed if that tree is over 36 inches in diameter. So under the current system, for example, a 20-inch diameter tree would only need to be replaced by 3 new trees. However, what we're proposing in our new system is inch-for-inch replacement. So every removed inch must be replaced either by replanting or by paying a fee. We'll talk about the fee next. But for example, that same 20-inch diameter tree would need to be replaced by 10 other trees of 2-inch caliper each. So you can see 10 trees, 2 inches each, 20 inches in replacement tree inches. Now, I mentioned fee in lieu. So this is something that our department and really the city in general has had since 1988. The fee in lieu was $100 per inch of trunk diameter. In 2021, we raised that to $200 per inch, both recognizing the inflation over time, but also the urban forestry master plan and how important public trees are to our city. Now, that was something that was not in code. So this is really an advancement to make sure that our proposed tree code now has those mitigation options. And not in the code, but in our manual, because it's something that'll need to be updated over time, is this rate of $260 per inch. And and when I say we, I mean Steve, did a really thorough job calculating that fee per inch, he looked at a survey of a representative number of public trees and appraised them, but also did activity-based accounting, looking at the labor and the supplies that were needed to plant back trees, as well as the inflation, over time and what a dollar was in 1988 versus today. So we feel very confident. Everything that he calculated was right around that $260 per inch. So we feel confident that that is a fair value to be charging for fee in lieu. And that fee goes to the tree fund, which forestry uses to plant more public trees here in Columbus. Just a visual of what we've just discussed. So say that 20-inch street tree is removed. There's three options, right? So replanting at 100%. So replanting those 20 inches that were lost with 10 2-inch trees. And that could be on site if possible. That's always the best option. Or that could be off site with approval from forestry. Or there's the option to pay a fee in lieu, so that $260 per inch times the 20 inches that were removed, or a combination. We're open to, if there's some trees that will fit back on site and then the project owner prefers to pay the remainder of those inches with the fee in lieu, that's also acceptable. Another important change that we're proposing here, in the past, we've had, to be very frank, a reactive, undersourced forestry team. And so we're excited to be better resourced and we have a set of experts, arborists within forestry. And so they'll be able to provide this technical expertise to facilitate mitigation, but also tree protection and plantings throughout projects across the city. What we're proposing is the time that takes to provide these inspections before, during, and after projects to make sure that trees are protected and planted properly. We've calculated what that fee would be based on the staff time. So those inspection fees are listed in this table based on the replanted tree quantities that would be proposed. We wouldn't be proposing a fee for tree protection inspections or planting of trees that weren't for mitigation. This would simply be for the removal of trees that are resulting in mitigation plantings. For the first time, we are asking for a public tree plan. We're requiring that in our manual, and a visual example is there on the top right. This information has been Some of it's been required through the executive order, but not necessarily in one place, in one consistent format. So what we're doing is having a template within our manual for designers to use when they're drafting plan sets, to have consistent symbols, consistent format, and this will really be a resource for those forestry inspectors to use throughout the project and make sure that regardless of what, to make sure what was approved during plan review is what's actually being executed throughout the project. The public tree plan has two components: the site plan, which includes the information of the person who collected the information, the work limits of the project, all the trees, the public trees that are growing within those work limits, the tree protection zones, which will often require fencing, as you can see in the bottom right, and then proposed removals and plantings. There's also a data table that will show either the tree tag or the inventory number for each tree, the species, diameter, and condition of each public tree, the critical root zone size, so the area that really needs to be protected to make sure that that the tree survives construction, because root damage during construction is a really negative impact to trees and their long-term survivability. And then proposed mitigation calculations. I mentioned the person contact information in the public tree plan. So this natural resources professional is also something that we've never had before. In the past, or actually in the current system, the person who collects information on the trees in a project could be an engineer, could be a surveyor, could be an intern. There's no requirements about who needs to collect that information or how knowledgeable they need to be. So by us requiring a natural resources professional, we're asking that that be a landscape architect, a certified arborist, a forester, or some other professional, could be an ecologist or a biologist, but we want someone who is knowledgeable about trees, tree biology, and can record both the tree-specific information, recommend appropriate tree protection measures, and ultimately recommend retention or removal of public trees based on the impacts of that construction or that maintenance project. Of course, forestry would ultimately approve these things, but what we want to do is make sure that the information that forestry reviews is trustworthy. And this will also allow us to update and improve our public tree inventory, which is a wonderful spatial database that we've invested in heavily to keep updated. And it'll also provide some protection to the project owner by showing the baseline tree condition before the project starts. In the event that the tree was already in poor condition, they're not going to be necessarily penalized for that tree going into decline during the project. The tree species list, so currently our code lists the prohibited tree species, and it's really a best practice, as we've been talking about, to take details that may change out of code and put them into this manual where we can, they carry the force of code, but they can be updated over time. So what we're proposing is to have the prohibited and recommended tree species lists as appendices in the manual. Like I said, it'll allow for more frequent updates as species availability changes, more research is done, and climate is changing. I wanted to mention the industry standards. So our manual for the first time is referencing at the American National Standards Institute, so a national nonprofit that has a lot of important safety, tree planting, and protection standards. So as the national standards get updated, our manual will stay current. We also have, as you can see on the right, an example, standard details for tree planting and tree protection. We're updating and creating new standard details that will be resources for construction projects. And then updating the Columbus construction and materials specifications, which is really important information that is used by other departments and contractors when it comes to public projects. So making sure that that manual is consistent with our manual. So just a summary, like we talked about, this is our first manual that we've ever had around trees. It'll be a really important piece to company code, the mitigation that's now applying to all projects. We have a stronger fee structure and replacement that's being required for tree mitigation of public trees here in the city. Better enforcement, and then we're now following best practices between the tree plan, the use of experts, the tree species list, and industry standards and standard details. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much, council members, and we would welcome any questions.